I have no desire to ever stop working. I know that regardless of what I'm doing, I'm always going to be interested in providing value, sharing wisdom, doing some type of work. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get a return on that in a monetary form. And that just frees me up to really make sure I'm leaning into these relationships that are really important to me right now.
Welcome to the Wealth Strategy Secrets of the Ultra Wealthy podcast, where we help entrepreneurs like you exponentially build wealth through passive income to live a life of freedom and prosperity. Are you tired of paying too much in taxes, gambling your future on the stock market, and want to learn about hidden strategies for making your money work for you? And now your host, Dave Wolcott, serial entrepreneur and author of the best-selling book, The Holistic Wealth Strategy.
How's it going, everyone? And welcome back to another episode on Wealth Strategy Secrets of the Ultra Wealthy. Today, we're challenging one of the most stubborn myths in finance, traditional retirement. My guest, Derek Coburn, wealth advisor and author of Let's Retire Retirement and founder of the Cadre community, has spent decades watching people optimize for a far-off finish line, only to sacrifice health, relationships, and purpose along the way. In this conversation, Derek and I unpack why the 18th century retirement model doesn't fit a 21st century life, how to think in terms of freedom now, not someday, and practical ways to realign your wealth plan with your real priorities. We'll dig into passive income versus accumulation, mini retirements, and Derek's alignment audit questions that help you invest better in assets, relationships, and yourself. If you want a playbook for living well today while compounding wisely for tomorrow, this episode is for you. Derek, welcome to the show.
What's up, Dave? Great to be here.
Yeah, grateful to have you on the show. And I know the audience is going to enjoy this discussion. And it's really one of my favorite concepts, actually, to talk about, too, which is, some of these old constructs, right, that somehow societal norms have kind of put us under. And one of them being retirement, right, which is really, so outdated, right? If you think about it, I mean, it literally comes from the 18th century and, we still live under this guise today with certain things that just haven't changed. And people really probably try to take advantage, right, of some of these frameworks to kind of slot you into it, but it's really their agenda, not necessarily your agenda. So really excited to unpack your book, talk about your book. Also, some of the other really great things you're doing with Cadre in terms of building, an amazing community of entrepreneurs, investors, really high-level people and thinking. So why don't we begin with, telling us a bit about your story, kind of how you got into the financial services industry and how you ended up to where you are today.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I began my career as a financial advisor in 1998. I got hired by Mass Mutual right out of college and was growing that practice and had a lot of early success to where I was qualifying for all the trips back when those were a thing, and found myself 10, 15 years younger than most of the people there. And I started having conversations with them, and I found a common thread. And that was most of the financial advisors had 1,500, 2,000 plus clients, and they only really enjoyed working with about 20% of them. And at that time, and even still to this day, there's a lot of compliance, a lot of red tape that prevents financial advisors from marketing the way other companies, other industries are able to market. And this is fast forward to about 2008, 2009, social media was popping up. I was developing a lot of relationships and connections with people. I wanted to take advantage of being able to market there and create word of mouth marketing. And so I started to rethink, is this really the thing that I want to be all in on? And I ended up, I had about 350 clients at the time, and I was getting ready to have a kid. And I basically kept about 20% of them, the good old 80-20 rule. And I used the additional time and space that I had created to start Cadre, which is a community for CEOs and entrepreneurs that we still run today. And that came from my transitioning as a financial advisor from cold calling to going to networking events, which seems to be a natural progression for most people. And then the networking events were were starting to become less and less useful. And I realized that the majority of the people that I wanted to meet weren't going to networking events because they were too busy building their business or spending time with their family or doing other things. So I started hosting smaller events that were really like my approach to networking. I wrote a book about networking called Networking is Not Working in 2014. And it was like page 1, chapter 1, don't go to large networking events. And it was really a book about client appreciation disguised as, or client acquisition disguised as client appreciation. I was hosting smaller events where I would invite clients to wine tastings, business seminars, golf events, and I would have them bring their friends and their colleagues. And for me, it was a great way to add value to our relationship. And then, oh, by the way, I got to meet people that I probably would not have met otherwise. So I took all that I learned from that, started Cadre as a way to allow a lot of professionals, mostly in the DC, Virginia, Maryland area at the time, to connect and meet the kinds of people they wanted to connect and meet with.
Yeah, no, it's quite a background. And so tell us a little bit more about your book, right? And this kind of notion of retirement, right? Because again, I find that it's so outdated. I mean, my perspective has just been, when I originally worked with financial advisors, 25 years ago, right? They really are just trying to use it to really kind of engineer this blueprint, right, of how much capital you need, based upon accumulation theory to get to this number at 65. And then you're going to run the Monte Carlo, simulation, right? And hopefully take home 4% of your net worth, and then hope you don't outlive your money. But you also have taxes, fees, and inflation to consider, once you get there. But what's interesting, like there's a whole component here that I want to break down with you, especially, as a financial advisor and someone kind of talking about this, maybe that model works, right, for some people. And there's kind of basically the tactics and the economics around that. Does that really make sense for you? And then there's this whole other piece around the psychological and then the mindset piece, because we end up, what it does is I think it's forced, society, right, into this role. And this is even globally, right? This is not even just US centric, where we're thinking about the future at 65. So 35, 40 years, you're going to start to travel the world, right? Yep. You're going to start to spend more time with your family. Right. Whereas when you kind of look at passive income type theory, it's all about creating income today, not at 65, to actually create the freedom in your life to be able to do those things that you want to do. Right. So you've got that whole mindset piece. And then, of course, even on the passive income side, right, it's like you could basically retire today if you want to use that word retirement. Yep. But why would you ever stop doing what you like doing? If you love what you're doing, why would you stop doing that? Because to me, work should be about purpose, right? Yep. It's about purpose and having kind of purpose. So, all right, I don't want to steal any of your thunder. Let's go.
Where's a good place to start, man? We can cover all of that.
Yeah, just go for it. Yeah, wherever makes sense.
Look, I really questioned the idea of retirement. I especially questioned how everybody just so easily and naturally accepted this as the default mode that they needed to lean into, that the money game was really the only game in town. I was seeing people that were getting close to retirement or retiring and not really finding it to be what they thought it was going to be. I remember reading The 4-Hour Work Week back in probably 2006, 2007, the book by Tim Ferriss, where he introduced the idea of mini retirement, which is you're spreading out all of the pleasures that you're putting off over the course of your life. And, I never had anybody really come into my office with, especially in the earlier years, with their hand raised, knowing that they wanted to retire, that they didn't want to retire. I would introduce the idea to them. And I think, when most people meet with a financial advisor, the financial advisor doesn't say, do you want to retire? The financial advisor says, what age do you want to retire? So you don't even have an option to opt out of this. You have to pick a number, and you have to pick a lot of other things, to your point. You have to what you think inflation is going to be every single year for the next 30 years. You have to pick what you think your pre-tax return is going to be on your retirement accounts. You have to pick what you think your return is going to be once you stop working. You have to decide whether Social Security will be available. You have to pick the age that you're going to die. And most people, they give 10 or 15 minutes of thought to all of these things. And then they get a number at the end of it, and they feel especially proud and confident that they should rework their entire lives in order to save this amount of money. I mean, it's similar to like an 8-game parlay on FanDuel. Like you're going to be, everybody's going to be wrong about all of these things, but they're putting so much faith into the assumptions that it just doesn't work. And so I would have people come in and they would say, I do want to retire. I want to retire at 65. And I would say, great, what do you want to do? And oftentimes couples would say, we want to travel the world together. And I would say, great. When was the last time you two went out on a date? And they would look at each other, and not often did I get a reply that was like a great reply. Or they'll say, I want to like spend a lot of time with my kids and grandkids. Another great thing. I do too. How often are you home for dinner right now? How many great trips are you taking each year with them right now? And maybe my favorite, usually this was reserved for men. They would say they want to play golf 5 days a week. And I would say, but you haven't played golf in 4 years. And you just had your hip replaced. So when is all this going to happen? And I think that people are just subconsciously opting into this idea, and they're sacrificing their health, their happiness, their key relationships in the name of being able to do it eventually at some point down the future. And then when they get there, those things are not available to them, or not available to them the way that they hope they would be. And they're wishing they could go back in time and make some different choices.
Yeah, that's so spot on. And you know, really through my journey, I've discovered that it's really all about freedom, and right. And when we talk about, you know, a lot of people will kind of throw around financial freedom, right? But, you know, I like to keep asking why, right? What does that really mean, right? And when you really look at the essence, especially of like entrepreneurs or high achievers, right? We're looking to really create freedom in our lives. And the reason why we want money is because we want to create an ever expanding, bigger future, right? It's all about that, right? Or creating bigger impact in the world, right? It's the money is actually going to amplify, you know, who you are and what you're doing, right? We also want to have this freedom of purpose, which is, you know, waking up every day and being excited about what you're doing. We also want to have like freedom of relationships. Like I get to have, I mean, I'm so grateful. I get to have great conversations with people like you, like-minded people that I enjoy. We connect with, we learn, we grow, we create value. And I get to do that all day versus spending time with, you know, toxic type relationships where people are dragging you backwards. And then you also have freedom of time. Right. To think about, you know, you get to spend, you know, if you want to go, you know, take your kids to school or watch their game or spend some extra time, you know, working out or whatever it might be, you know, you get to actually choose that. So I believe it really comes down to freedom. And there's multiple dimensions of freedom is what people are really looking for. So I think if people can figure out how to define what that vision is, you know, for them and figure out what that freedom really looks like for them, then they can define it today.
Yeah. And I think that the biggest thing that people don't really understand is they don't understand how much less pressure they will feel to have to save right now once they realize and recognize that they're probably going to be working longer than what they've been told or what they thought. The math is pretty crazy, right? I have a story in my book called A Tale of Two Tonys. And Tony's 45 years old. He makes $150,000 a year, and he has $150,000 saved up in his investments. Now, for people that are listening to this show, I think those numbers might be a little bit higher, and the numbers can be higher. We can change them around, but the basic math is not going to change. Tony meets with a financial advisor and says he wants to retire at 65 because that's the age that everyone else is saying that they're retiring. And Tony's advisor ends up telling him he has to save $2,400 a month, every single month, adjusted for inflation, for the next 20 years in order to stop working. So regardless of what you're making, that's 20%, $2,400 a month times 12, 30 grand. He's making 150. Saving 20% is a non-starter for most people. It means they're probably saving almost as much as they're spending. Doesn't have to be, but it can be. So I introduced this alternate reality. Have you ever seen the movie Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow?
Haven't seen that one.
It's a movie that basically has her on two timelines and how different her life will be if she catches a train or not. And so I create this alternate reality where Tony goes back home after that first meeting and he's talking with his wife. And his wife says, why do you want to retire at 65? You like what you do. You like the people that you do it with. And even if you're not doing this, I can't imagine that you're going to sit around and do nothing for 30 years. And he's like, you know what, you're right. So he reaches back out to the financial advisor and he says, I want to retire at 75 instead of 65. What do you think the amount that he needs to save goes down to, from 2,400 to what, by working 10 extra years?
It's probably 50%.
It goes down to $110. It goes down by 96%. And if Tony were to say, I'll work 5 extra years, I'll go until I'm 70, then the amount goes down by 75%. Now he only needs to save $600 instead of $2,400. And the reason for this is, in the first example, I have him dying at 95 in both scenarios. In the first example, it's 10 less years of working, 10 less years of saving, 10 less years of having that money grow, and he needs an amount of money that will last for 30 years. In the second scenario, he has 10 extra years of working, 10 extra years of letting that money grow. He's not touching it. And then he only needs an amount of money that will last for 20 years. And so I think everybody knows they should be spending more time with their spouse and their kids and going to the gym and being with friends and having more fun and contributing to the world in a better way. But no one's really addressed the elephant in the room, which most people feel, I don't know how I can afford to take the time away from my work in order to do these things. And what I want people to realize is that by planning and recognizing that you're going to work longer, you have a lot more money and a lot more time that you can spend differently right now.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an interesting point. And, one thing I think that's really fascinating here, and hopefully our audience is ahead of the curve on this, but, I think 80% of all of this is really mindset. So if you think about it, if you're working towards accumulation theory, you are actually manifesting yourself into kind of this whole scarcity mindset around, hey, I've got to have enough for this retirement number. Yep. When in reality, you could be one relationship away from the biggest opportunity of your life and 10x your income.
For
right?
Sure.
But here you're playing a small game by just trying to save, 10, 20% a month and trying to get to some kind of number. Now, Derek, let me ask you this question. Okay. This is great. I know my audience has probably heard this example a couple times, but I think it's a great example. And I would love to see you, really validate this or see if I'm incorrect, because I'm always open to learning. I love to learn new things. But let's just make a comparison for people. You had a great example of the two Tonys. So we pick another name and we can come up with another example. But let's just track investor A, who is tracking towards accumulation theory. And let's say they build up a nest egg of 4 million, right? Yep. So high level, if you then break that 4 million down, and 4%. I know planning has even come down off of that 4%, but let's just conservatively say you got 4% of that 4 million. So that's 160K in income, right, for that year at 65.
Yep.
Guessing that income is coming from qualified funds. So you're probably at the highest taxable rate. So therefore, what do you think that net is ballpark if you take out taxes, fees, and inflation off that 160?
Like 90, I guess, or?
Okay, yeah, 90, 100. I don't know the exact number, but let's just go. Let's call it 100. Let's be conservative. So if you worked your whole life to scrounge, 4 million, you think you're doing well, and now you're netting, 100. Now let's compare that to, a client B here in another scenario who's been investing into passive investments and private investments like commercial real estate and other things. And you could take that same 4 million, and it's very realistic to have an 8% yield off of those assets, which would give you double that, right? You double the 160, so you're at 320. And if you've been doing them in the right real estate assets, you should be paying nominal tax or maybe even no tax on that. So now you've actually doubled your income right there. Yep. And at the same time, that asset value of that real estate or those other investments are still growing about 10% a year in addition to the cash flow that they're kicking off.
Yep. I love it.
So Okay, so it's like, which scenario would you rather be on? It's even the same amount of capital, but just a different strategy. And so therefore, you're actually creating more income for yourself. And that's how you can actually create generational wealth.
No, I agree, man. And I think that like the game that I'm playing right now is like I'm in the business of minimizing future regrets. And I think that regardless of what we're saving, I want to try to significantly reduce the number of people 15, 20 years from now who have distant relationships with their kids, who have uninspired relationships with their spouse, people that are sitting around their house, not really engaging with other people very often, people who are taking a lot of medications because they didn't take care of themselves. And I think that, like, for me, I'm a huge proponent of the passive income approach. And I work that to a lot of my conversations. I subscribe to it myself, but I also feel like that the 1A, the best asset that any of us have, is our ability and desire to continue to show up in the world and produce and earn income in exchange for the value and the wisdom and the gifts that we share with the world. And so for me, like, we can talk about what types of investments to use, and maybe even using better investments will free up some of the time and some of the money that will allow us to do that. If my macro thesis is, look, I think that banking on having money coming in your 70s is going to create more time for you to do different things right now. I'm living that on a micro level at the moment because I've got two boys who are 15 and 13, and they're going to be off to college in 3 and 5 years respectively. Tim Urban on his Wait But Why blog, shared a few years ago that do you have kids?
Yeah, I have 4.
Yeah. He said that when they go off to college, that you have already spent 93% of the time that you're going to spend with them over the course of your life. And then you can also look at that in reverse to see how often do I see my parents? Where do they live? And how many more times am I going to get to spend with them? And so for me right now, what I'm solving for on a daily basis is I'm solving for maximum time with my kids, spending as much time with them as possible, in part because I feel like the 5 or 6 year from now version of me is sponsoring my current decisions. It's almost like it's writing me a sponsorship check to say, you can lean into this now, because once your youngest is gone, I'll say yes to a lot more speaking gigs. I'll say yes to more work. I'll say yes to 50-hour, 60-hour weeks again. And that just liberates me to have the freedom to lean into like being a dad and being a husband and being a friend right now.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Let's help the audience really understand one dynamic here, which is where I think it can get a little tricky sometimes, right? I think what we're really talking about, if you kind of look at it high level, is really a balance between the present and the future.
Yep.
Right. And so, we're investing, we're doing things for the future because you want to have, a rich and wealthy future. But at the same time, you need to be investing today, right, and doing things today, because all we really have is today. Right. Yep. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. So things like your health or those relationships that you talk about, but that could mean, maybe you're not working, whatever it is, a 40, 60-hour work week. Maybe you're putting in, 2 hours a day working out, right? Because that's your priority. Or maybe you're spending extra time with your kids. Or if your parents are aging and you're taking time away from your workout plan or your other family to go see them. How can people really think through some of those nuances really about, balancing investing in the present, right? Being mindful in the present for what we have with those future goals we have.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings, mantras, I would say, is I live my life like I'm going to live to 100, and I live my life like I'm going to die tomorrow. And I try to hold both those beliefs and give them the same weight. And there are some days where I need to hear one versus the other. There are some hours where I go back and forth. And so I think that it's going to be different on a case-by-case basis. As it applies to my kids, I've spent time thinking about this. When my kids were 10 and 7, we had a nighttime routine where my wife and I would take turns putting the other one to bed. We would read a story. We would say a prayer. We would snuggle with them. And I found myself a lot of nights like wishing he would hurry up and fall asleep so I could get the heck out of there and go watch a show or respond to an email. And I'm thinking, gosh, he's not going to really want me doing this for that much longer. He's getting older. And I tried to lean into it more. And I eventually landed on, this crazy like hypothetical where what if like 25 years from now, there's a company that invented a time machine and they're offering me the opportunity to go back in time for one night, if I'm 60 or 70 at the time, one night with the 10-year-old version of my kid to have one nighttime routine where I get to like read him a story, snuggle with him. What would I pay for that? Like, and I just blurted out I would write a check for $50,000 without even thinking twice about it. Right. And I think that like, there's just a lot of $50,000 moments that we're all taking for granted on a regular basis. And even though I'm not snuggling with my kids to put them to bed anymore, you know, I have a gym in my house and I work out 3 days a week with my 15-year-old. And granted, he's not talking to me for 45 of those 60 minutes, but I'm in the game and I'm present and we are talking for some of that time. And my youngest, he's doing travel soccer now. So we've got a lot of time in the car together. And I just think we're really going to miss this when it's gone. And this is time that we're not going to be able to reinvent. I don't think there is going to be a company with a time machine in the future. And so for me, just knowing, like, just to double down on everything that you were saying, like I have no desire to ever stop working. I know that regardless of what I'm doing, I'm always going to be interested in providing value, sharing wisdom, doing some type of work. Almost likely, you know, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get a return on that in a monetary form. And that just frees me up to really make sure I'm leaning into these relationships that are really important to me right now.
Hey, it's Dave Wolcott here. Let me ask you something. Are you tired of the same old financial advice that leaves you spinning your wheels? If you're ready to discover the real secrets the ultra wealthy use to build unstoppable wealth, then I've got something just for you. My new book, The Holistic Wealth Strategy, is your ticket to learning the proven strategies that the top 1% don't want you to know. This book isn't just about money. It's about building a life of purpose, freedom, and lasting impact. And I want to give you a free copy. Visit holisticwealthstrategy.com and get yours today. It's time to level up your financial game and create the future you deserve. Yeah, you know, it's so interesting because, you know, we've talked to thousands of investors also. And, you know, at the end of the day, right, we're talking about tactics sometimes of investments and different strategies and all these things. But the real goal is all these things that we're talking about, right?
Yep.
Has actually nothing to do with money. One question I love to ask people to think about it is, you know, if I gave you 100 million, you know, today, how does that change your life? Right?
Yeah.
And some people haven't even really thought through it. They don't know. I mean, outside of, okay, maybe I buy a car or get a bigger house or whatever. They haven't really thought about, you know, what that could be. Right. And maybe a good way to think through that is the top 100 be, do, have list is a great one. Right. Because what I find is that so many of the things that you're actually really longing for and aspiring for are totally within your reach today.
Yeah.
And don't even require capital to get there.
Yes. And again, like to your point, that just buying into the concept of retirement, you're buying into the idea that life's going to be better in the future than it is right now. And just even that mindset can weigh on you so much. It's funny that you have that $100 million question because that's question number one in three questions that I have always asked my clients. I call it the alignment audit. And I ask them, if you ended up winning the lottery and getting $100 million, how would your life change? The second question is, if you meet a doctor and the doctor tells you that you have a year left to live, what are you going to do? And the third question is, if the same doctor said you're going to die tomorrow, what would be your biggest regret? And so answering those questions can really inform you as to whether or not you're really living your life in alignment with the way that you want to be living your life.
Yeah, no, that's totally spot on. And, you know, if we just go back to this retirement notion, right? The definition of retirement is really putting something, you know, out to pasture, right?
Yep.
And this came from a different generation, right? Where we were working in factories. Right. I mean, that's why they did that. I mean, people couldn't really work past, 8 hours. You would wear people out and things. But today we live in the information age with, so much, technology and resources, at our disposal. So, how can we live a more fulfilled life? And, work, I think if you can really start to create work as your purpose, right? It's not work, right? It's fun. And these are some of the lessons, like, we talk about in our mastermind community, and also like with my kids, because my kids are in their 20s now too. And it's, I want them to experience all these different things in life. Go take whatever job you're going to do and learn from it. It's all about the learning, so you can find out where are you congruent, right, with your own values, with your own path, and feel fulfilled. The money comes later, right? Don't chase the money, chase where you're going to be fulfilled, and then things just really line up for you.
I hope I look like you when I've got kids in my 20s, man. You look great.
Well, appreciate that. But that goes back to everything we've been talking about, right? Yeah. It's making investments. And I've been investing in my health since my early days, and I continue to. And now with, all kinds of new, technologies, regenerative technologies and biohacking, I love all of that, because you are your greatest asset. And you said it earlier. And people should you should physically write on your balance sheet, you as the biggest
I like that
asset and the most foundational asset, right? Because as you said, right, I mean, that's where I see 10x, 100x type of return. But the minute, you turn that off or you stop working, right, you kind of stop contributing. And also that's a real psychological upgrade. Right.
Yes.
When you see yourself like that, you can really transition from that scarcity type of mindset. Like, hey, I need to just, get money and hold on to it and not lose it and things like that, to really living your fullest life.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up purpose. I have a whole chapter in my book about purpose versus happiness. And I'll share the basic premise and a little research around that with you in a second. When I started writing the book, I was using language like find a job you love and have it be your purpose. And I walked that back before I turned in my final manuscript, to use language like have a job that you don't hate, have a job that doesn't like suck your soul. And I think that, like, for some people, feeling the pressure, the need to find work that fulfills their life purpose or is their life purpose can feel like a lot. And I think that there are also a lot of people out here where their purpose might be they're the ones that organize the 2 trips that all the friends take together every single year, or they're the ones that plan the big family excursions or the family outings. And I mentioned a guy in my book, a friend of my brother-in-law's, who works at a tech firm, and he likes his job and he likes the people he does it with. He doesn't love it. He doesn't think it's his calling. What he loves is he loves live music, and he loves the live music community, and he loves seeing fish. And so he found a job that he thinks is good, not great, not like his reason for being on the earth, but like it gives him the flexibility and the freedom to live out his purpose and do what he wants to do. And I think that can work for some people. For you and I think it's more where we found sort of like we aligned our purpose with our work, and I feel great about that. And for others, maybe there's a couple of in between steps where they don't have to, gosh, I hate this job, I have to find like my purpose for being here. Just get out of the thing that is really ruining your life right now, and find something that's a little bit more palatable and regain your footing, and then maybe go from there.
Yeah, that's spot on, Derek. One of the best interviews we've had on the show was a gentleman named Charlie Garcia, who runs a community called R360. So it's Centimillionaires community, right?
Okay.
And I had asked him the question, what is one of the most important attributes, of your members, and what do you think people hold true the most? And he said his answer was self-awareness, right? So you don't need to be the next Steve Jobs or Tony Robbins, right, to have some kind of purpose and really conquer the world, right, to be fulfilled. However, I think that when you can really understand yourself and understand, where is there friction? Where is there flow? Right? Where can I be in flow? Maybe I'm a people person. Maybe I'm not a people person. Yep. Right? What are the things that I really excel at and then come easy to me? and then they're difficult for other people. Well, that's my unique ability. So, we often talk in our mastermind community about your superpower, right? What's your superpower? Because it's easy for you. I think it's really about that self-awareness, right? And figuring out what that is for you. And of course, it's different for everyone. And whether that's, seeing fish or, being a marine biologist or anything, that's amazing, right? To be able to kind of get there. But I encourage people to just to first of all be courageous, right? And trying to find that and be committed to really trying to find where you can be in flow, where you have, the most success and freedom, because money and some of these other things, they all come with that, right? You don't want to chase it in the wrong order.
Yeah, I feel like the best person for any of us to get advice from is the best and most and highest and best version of ourselves. And I think that most people are not really close to that. Most people are dealing with the stresses of a business, of things going on in their family, with their health, fill in the blank. And so using some of the time that you may now have, recognizing that you can work longer because you've got some good passive income plans that are set up in place to get yourself right, get yourself a little bit closer to making better choices, to being a more reliable source of advice. Like, I think human connection is a big thing. There was a study done a few years ago that showed the amount of time that Americans spend with various people, ranging from themselves, how much time you spend alone, how much time you spend with a significant other, coworkers, friends, children. And one of the big takeaways from a lot of the online influencers was, you're going to spend 400 minutes a day by yourself beginning in your 60s. So you better learn to get comfortable being by yourself. And I think that's important. The one that stood out to me was the friend category. So with friends between the ages of 10 and 25, we're spending over 100 minutes a day hanging out with friends. When my kids wake up, they're like, what are my friends doing today? What am I going to do to have a good time with them? And it goes down to about 30 minutes in your 30s. And then goes even lower than that and just flattens out. And I don't know when we decided to devalue the importance of friendship. And we spend so much time thinking about how much money do I need to retire, and not really any time thinking about who do I want to retire with and who do I want to be around now, because being around people that light you up, that are like-minded, that are making you feel good, that are giving you good advice and good feedback, and going to the gym more and having a strong connection with your wife. I mean, look, I've spent $250,000 on couples therapy over the past 20 years. Like, I've resisted putting that number into a calculator to see what it would be worth if I would have invested it. But my game's not over. Right now, I'm creating and I'm producing. I'm 48, and I've got an incredible relationship with my wife because of how much time and money we've invested in that relationship, and the way that I'm showing up, my output, my writing, my influence is much better than it would be if I had more of a stagnant relationship with her. And so these are opportunities the last chapter of my book is called Investing in You, opportunities to put the money that maybe we thought we had to throw into a retirement plan so that we could stop at a certain age. We can now put that back into us and make that you on the balance sheet a little bit more valuable, and then see what comes from this rejuvenated version of you compared to maybe the one that's out there right now.
Yeah, love that. So, you run a high-end community, and how do you talk to clients, right, about that type of investment, right? Because people are always thinking, again, right, it's a big ticket item, I'm sure, to invest, in your community, but it is an investment, right? And what is really the thought process you talk to with people about, kind of trying to make that type of commitment?
I drew a line between my businesses, for better or for worse. I just said, as soon as I committed to charging for Cadre, we charge $1,000 a month, and we host a variety of events, both virtual and some in person for our local members. But I said, I'm not going to, because I'm charging them, I'm not going to use it as a way to pitch my wealth management services. And I'm not doing that really anymore anyways. But when I first started, I was very much still running the wealth management practice. And what I told my wealth management clients was, look, I'm going to be doing this other thing. I don't want you to think I'm not paying attention to you. I got rid of a lot of my other clients to free up the space for me to grow my network, to have a lot more connections, and to be more resourceful for you. And so a lot of my clients were partners at big law firms and had some business owners, and the business owners typically came over and became members, but I never really mixed the two up. But I think now, like 2025, with everything going on in the world, I think that like it's just a really important piece that people need to lean back into again. Find people that you like being around, find people that lift you up, find people that are not a drain on you, because energetically and chemically in your body, what it's going to do for you can't really be replicated with a pill or anything else.
Yeah, I got to tell you, it's been one of the most rewarding things watching, people inside of our mastermind community to grow and learn and connect. And, from the beginning, people are always a little, this is a big commitment, right? It's expensive. It's a big check.
What do you guys charge?
Our mastermind community is $15,000
cool.
For the year. And we basically, will try to find we want the right fit, clients that want to come in and make that commitment to themselves. And our goal is to actually 10X, your investment in that. And you can 10X that through things that you've learned, through tax savings, through optimizing your different investments, through creating new connections, through creating accountability, through leveling up, through increasing your health, through increasing your relationship, all these kind of things. And sometimes it's interesting because the biggest thing holding people back is themselves, right?
Yep.
It's the mindset. But then once you make that commitment, right, and then you have the courage and you invest, right? The minute you sign that check, you are invested. And then to watch the trajectory of these people, because now when you pay attention, right? And now these people are committed to grow, and the levels of their life that they've grown in it's really spectacular. It's like just watching a complete transformation.
Yeah, the reason why the quality, the curation has always been so good with our community, and people will ask, and I don't expect anybody to believe me when I say that, but one day, I just blurted out there. Somebody said, why do you have such great people in your community? And it was the revenue that I generate from my wealth management practice. This is like back in 2015, 2016. A lot is paying my bills. Like I don't need anybody's $500 a month, which is what we were charging at the time to pay for my kids' education, it's always just been more like me having two things going side by side really freed me up to have the ability and the courage to stick to my guns about who's a good fit in a way I don't think I would have done if I was relying on just one of them as a source of income. And we were at 78 members, all but 3 were local to DC going into COVID. And we got really good at I think, doing some virtual programming during COVID and providing a place where a lot of people could come together. We ended up getting as high as 130, and we lowered the price point a little bit. And I just noticed recently some languishing. I'm noticing it just in general, like at the world at large, where people are just kind of like in this little groove, and the fire's not burning inside them anymore. They're not looking to do big things. And so we just ended up like reducing our membership. We doubled what we were charging and cut our membership by about 50% as a way to reboot the energy. Like everything that you're talking about, I wanted extreme buy-in from the people that were really excited about leaning into doing big things and in their life, in their business, what have you. And I wanted to be able to like give those that maybe that's not where they're at right now, the opportunity to step away. And so it ended up being a really great exercise. And everybody's really excited. It's like, yeah, I'm paying more. I'm going to lean into it even harder. And I think the good old, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. We've all heard that. We all know about it. And I think that a lot of us are a little slow sometimes to update the software. As we advance, as we improve our lives, as our vision gets bigger, we're not looking around immediately to say, are these the people that I want to be, are the best people for me to be hanging around to help me achieve like this next level that I'm trying to get to? Yeah.
Derek, if you could give just one piece of advice about how the listeners could really accelerate their own wealth trajectory, what would it be?
I think I would just piggyback on some of what we've been talking about already. And that is, I think that a lot of people, whether they think they're waiting for retirement, or whether they think they're waiting for the sale of their company, or they're waiting to bring in the CEO, or they're waiting to have a little bit more money in their investment accounts, that they're not really focused on living their life and leaning in right now. And I think a lot of the things that I mentioned, the time with friends, the time with kids, the time with the spouse, taking care of yourself. A lot of people feel like they don't have time to do those things. And there's a lot of data to support what I'm about to share. And that is, and it's been true for me in my personal experience, that when I take a step back and I spend less time working and more time investing in those things, that even though I am spending less time in the office, I am more productive, I'm making more money, I'm generating better ideas, and I'm adding more value than I was if I weren't doing that. And so, like, sleep is another example, right? Like, I would say I have an Oura Ring, which tracks and monitors your sleep. I've had it since 2017. I don't think I ever got higher than an 80 out of 100 sleep score for the first 5 years I had it. And I just said, I am going to set a goal for myself. I want to wake up and feel amazing every single morning. And now I get like high 80s, low 90s almost every night when I'm at my house. And the way I wake up, the way I feel in the morning, I didn't know that it was on the menu a couple of years ago. And when you wake up and feel great, you make better choices at 9 o'clock. And those better choices at 9 o'clock lead to you picking the salad for lunch instead of the cheeseburger. And you having the salad for lunch instead of the cheeseburger means you're showing up better for your client at 3 o'clock than you would have if you had the cheeseburger. And you showing up better for your client at 3 o'clock makes it more likely you're not going to skip your workout at 5 o'clock. And so I really do think I want people to recognize and realize that pouring more into them and their life, filling their cup, filling their soul, filling their spirit is the ancillary benefit of all that is I think you're going to end up having a lot more money than you would if you just kept grinding it out at work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Awareness is everything. And once you can really make that paradigm shift, right, to investing in yourself and starting to see these things, you'll see how things can really blossom for you. Yep. So Derek, really appreciate your time and insights today, full of wisdom and everything. We're definitely aligned, I think, in terms of how we think, and, appreciate you sharing those stories and wisdom with our audience.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dave. It was great talking with you, and excited to stay in touch.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Wealth Strategy Secrets. If you'd like to get a free copy of the book, go to holisticwealthstrategy.com. That's holisticwealthstrategy.com. If you'd like to learn more about upcoming opportunities at Pantheon, please visit pantheoninvest.com. That's pantheoninvest.com.